Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for July 6th of 2023, and currently we have an enhanced risk set up for eastern Colorado into southwestern Kansas into parts of northern Oklahoma. The pretty large slight risk around that goes into the majority of northern Oklahoma, all the way up into the southern parts of Montana, across much of eastern Wyoming and western Nebraska, and parts of southwestern South Dakota. We have a pretty large marginal threat around that too, that extends across eastern New Mexico and down into northern Louisiana and southern Arkansas, up across the majority of Oklahoma, western Kansas, western Nebraska, parts of western South Dakota and southern Montana, and into eastern Wyoming, eastern Colorado, and again eastern parts of New Mexico. Our threats for this include a 5% tornado threat for that enhanced risk region, with a 2% around that goes into northern Oklahoma and parts of eastern Wyoming and parts of western Nebraska. As for our wind threats, we do have a 30% hat significant on a 15% and a 5% with another 15% further up north. What this is going to mean is that we have the possibility of strong destructive wind gusts up to 15 knots or higher, likely getting up to the possibility of maybe 70 knots to possibly 80 knots, maybe even higher as well. As for our hail threats, we do have a 30% with a hatch significant that goes up north to the majority of the 15% region across eastern Wyoming and parts of South Dakota and Nebraska, with another 5% for parts of Oklahoma, southern Arkansas, and north Texas. This is likely going to be separate, and it's likely going to be associated with a little bit of ongoing convection as it moves into southern Arkansas and north Louisiana. And as for this hatch significant, what that means is that we have the possibility of hail up to 1 inch in diameter, or even maybe larger, like possibly 2 inches or 3 inches, or again, maybe even larger. Taking a look at our pivotal weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, you can see that we do have a strong active jet stream that is being left in the wake of the strong shortwave trough that was moving out of Canada that triggered severe weather for much of this week, for the first half of this week, and now we have a strong active jet stream coming out of the Pacific. You can see two areas of a strong mid-level impulse right here and right here, with some mid-level flow in the 30 knots to possibly a low 40 knots, maybe the upper 30 knots. This is going to help trigger severe weather development for today, and also lead for the possibility of elongated photographs for our large hail potential, as well as the possibility of a strong wind shear for the possibility of tornadoes as well. Taking a look at our dew points, you can see around the area of storm development, we do have much more tame dew points, with dew points in the upper 50s to the low 60s and maybe the mid 60s as well. With whatever lapse rates we have, we could definitely see the possibility of much more moderate instability. We could definitely see the possibility of much more moderate instability with dew points like this, with the possibility of Cape values to reach the 2000s, the 2500s, and maybe the low 3000s, depending on our lapse rates if they are strong. And if they are strong, we could maybe even see up to the mid 3000s possibly. Taking a look at our lapse rates, you can see off the bat we do have some fairly moderate lapse rates. However, those are expected to increase around midday when storm development is expected to begin. You can see those lapse rates are expected to increase into the 8s and possibly the upper 8s as well as the upper 7s as well. Given our dew points, we could definitely see the possibility of some Cape values that do reach the upper moderates, the 2500, the upper 2000s, as well as the low 3000s and possibly the mid 3000s as well, maybe getting up to the upper 3000s in some isolated pockets. And what this means in terms of hail is that with strong instability regarding these lapse rates and dew points and strong lapse rates are going to pull the hail, optimal hail development layer further down to the ground. So a strong updraft is going to allow for those hail particles to reach that optimal hail development layer in the atmosphere much easier, because it's lower down to the ground, and it doesn't have to work much harder regarding our lapse rates and our Cape values to get higher up into the atmosphere for hail development. However, that also means that those large hail particles that do develop have the potential to fall really, really quickly in large quantities. Taking a look at our instability, you can see right around storm development time, we do have some fairly strong instability. We have instability that is reaching the upper 2000s and the low 3000s, and then also the upper 3000s in some isolated pockets, as well as the mid 3000s, and even some isolated areas in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandle that is reaching the upper 4000s. However, because it's such a small area, I do not think that we're going to get Cape values that do reach the 5000s or the upper 4000s. However, we could definitely see the possibility of Cape values that do reach the upper 3000s in some isolated pockets. And with strong instability like this regarding our lapse rates, we could definitely see the possibility of some large hail, as well as the possibility of some destructive outflow gusts, as well as the possibility of multiple tornadoes today regarding our wind shear. And you can see as storms develop and Cape develops, you can see it does increase quite a lot towards southwestern Kansas and southeastern Colorado. You can see as storms develop and they move into that strong area of strong lapse rates, you can see as they pass into Kansas, they are expected to rapidly organize and then move into North Oklahoma, where they can use much more moderate instability, however, and allow for the possibility of maybe some large hail as well as the possibility of some damaging outflow gusts and maybe even destructive outflow gusts as this strong squall line moves into Kansas and northern Oklahoma. Taking a look at our wind shear, you can see that we do have some fairly strong wind shear off the bat. A lot of this is going to be speed shear, however, also a lot of this is going to be the possibility of some strong directional shear. We are expected to have very, very strong directional shear. However, it's not going to be too strong. It's definitely going to stay around the 5% tornado threat area. It's not going to get into the crazy 10%. However, we could definitely see the possibility of multiple tornadoes today regarding our instability and our wind shear. And you can see that we do have some fairly strong wind shear. You can see around this area we do have very strong widespread wind shear, and ahead of that line we can see a pocket of wind shear that's reaching up to the 80 knots, and it is expected to possibly get into the simulated values of 100 knots ahead of that line there. So we could definitely see the possibility of multiple tornadoes today, as well as the possibility of, again, some very large hail, as well as the possibility of some destructive outflow gusts. But with wind shear and strong instability, we could definitely see the possibility of multiple tornadoes today. And even taking a look at one of the simulated soundings ahead of that line in the area, let's say you can see the 100 knots there. Let's go to the 80 knots here, so it's a little bit more realistic. You can see that we have very, very strong instability here. You can see strong instability, but then we also have strong convective inhibition right here, which is going to decrease our Cape values a ton. So with crazy strong wind shear, like you're seeing right here on this photograph, that is extremely strong low-level shear. And that would boost us up to a 10% tornado threat if we had strong instability. But with crazy strong convective inhibition, we definitely have the possibility of much less Cape values compared to what is currently being forecasted on our Cape models. So with strong convective inhibition, we have much weaker overall instability, and with much weaker overall instability and strong wind shear, we only get up to the possibility of a 5% tornado threat. But if we had strong instability that the models are forecasting, we would definitely get up to the possibility of a 10% tornado threat. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And if you're in any of the areas that I covered for severe weather development for today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow in another forecast.